In dealership fixed ops, profit usually does not disappear all at once. It leaks slowly, and most of the time, it starts before anyone sees it in the numbers. A customer pulls into the service lane, the shop is busy, repair orders are moving, everyone looks active, but then the process starts to slow down. When the advisor does not have a clear answer, the customer does not understand the recommendation, nothing looks broken in that moment, but the customer feels the friction, and the tire conversation takes too long, and service feels easier somewhere else. That customer starts learning to trust someone else. Today, I'm joined by Richard Lupo, Fixed Operations Director at Apple Tree Honda and Acura. Richard brings a different kind of perspective to this conversation. His background includes racing, independent repair, Midas franchise ownership, and now leader in fixed ops. Your family name shows up in sprint car history, and you personally came up around that world. So, what did racing teach you that still shows up today in how you run your business?
Well, it was part of my formative years. My father was racing before I was born, and when he retired, I assumed the driving duties and worked, during my years growing up on the race cars, helping out and traveling and doing all those things. So it was definitely a big part of the formative years for me. And there's now three or four things that I hold dear to me that and those lessons that I learned. I think probably the first thing the easiest thing for me is the importance of moxie, for maybe lack of a better term. It's no different than if you're a CEO, a surgeon, somebody that's, wants to be president of the United States. You've got to have that certain bit of attitude and that confidence to be effective in the job. And it's actually a requirement for success, I think. And when to a much lesser degree, but if you're going to take a staff of 100 people and, open your doors and, feel that you can competently service 100, 200 cars a day and pull it all off, you've got to have a confidence that you in your abilities, and it takes a little bit of moxie to do that on a day in and day out basis. So I think that's probably the one thing that would be the first thing that comes to mind. And the second thing is in racing, just as in business, and business racing is a business at this point, there's no doubt about that, but there's a need at the performance level when you're at the track for constant innovation. And, if you're running the same chassis and the same engines and, all the same parts as your competitors, it becomes very difficult to find that competitive edge. And so you've got to have people that are thinking outside the box and, just constantly looking for that, that 1% gain on your car, in your setups, all those kinds of things like that. Once you get to a professional level, series, the drivers are all very capable, and you've got to be able to find and search for that one constant, that one little edge that you can find. And if you're doing the same thing all the rest of the other guys are doing, it becomes incredibly more difficult to do that. And so you've got to constantly be innovating. You cannot be satisfied with today's success.
In your business, just like in racing, it takes a lot of preparation. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I used to fly aerobatic airplane, and
Uh,
the routine was like a few minutes in the air, and you take off, but you do your routine in a couple of minutes. But the preparation that goes into prepping
uh,
that plane, making sure everything is going to be fine, and I know for you in racing, probably the same thing. I wonder in the car dealership when fix ops is concerned, you guys are services people's car. I mean, lives depends on it, right?
oh yeah.
What sort of preparation goes behind that you've taken from that racing world and bringing into your career or your business in fixed ops? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, in racing, if the car breaks, first of all, you're not going to can't be in the race and win it. If you're not in the race, you can't win it. That's the first thing. So if the car breaks, you're not able to win or even compete. And so there's that. And really, in the preparation, when you're talking about dealership, when you're talking about fixed ops, Um, you really want to be able to communicate and convey those those things that are important consistently to your team, so that they don't lose sight of putting an oil cap on or leaving a lug nut loose, or even going that one extra step, and go in that diagnostic tree to make sure and confirm that whatever repair that you're going to recommend to the customer is going to be the correct and proper fix for that. So yeah, preparation is key. Also, you know, giving the advisors and the technicians the tools that they need to be successful. Texting, communication platforms, payment collection for advisors, giving them resources of shuttle drivers, porters, car washers, rental cars, all those kinds of things, giving them the resources and the tools they need to be successful with the customer, making sure your technicians have the proper equipment, you know, so that they have the best brake lays and the best tire balancers and all of those things that will give a more quality and consistent result for the customer.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Hey, I was telling you earlier before we started the episode that your father's name is all over the sprint car history, right?
it is.
Which is kind of like amazing. And I see your name, and I mean, coming out from the records from the early 90s, it's kind of like what I found out when I was preparing for this podcast. How should people understand that chapter of your life? You were young, and tell us a little bit more about that. I'm very curious.
Well, yeah, I would say that when my driving career came to an end, it probably took a couple of years to recover. It, on a personal level, racing was all consuming for not just me, but our entire family. And when that chapter closed, it took a little bit of time to, reflect and get proper perspective on what it meant to my life, and it shaped my life. And there was really great people that came into my life because of racing that changed my life in a way that I could never have expected. And to this day, the experiences that racing and the people that it brought into my life still shape what I do on a daily basis. So I would say that the immediate effects of having, because I started driving when I was still in high school, and the effects of people walking around with your likeness on their T-shirt and having a fan club when you're 18 years old is not actually probably healthy. So it took a couple of years of recovery to get past that and get proper perspective on it. But the lessons, especially now, have been invaluable. So that's how I would think about that. And some of the couple of things that we talked about earlier with some of the things that I bring to those lessons. And I would say there's one or two more things that I pull forward from racing that were true in racing and are relevant, very relevant to the business today. And I think one of the other things that I learned is that the spoils do go to the victor, and not just in prize money, but if you're a team that's on top and you're out front and you're doing those things, and you've got vendors, third parties that are developing new products, for a race car, they're going to come to you as a top team and offer you access to those products a lot of times for free, or at discounted rates, just so when they're trying to establish their new products or innovations in the market, they can say that product or innovation is associated with the top teams in the racing world. And that's no different here. I try to be very progressive in the leadership here, and I get contacted by people who have the latest, greatest products, and it definitely helps keep us ahead of our competition. So I would say that one of the true lessons is that the spoils do go to the victor, and that is something that has been valuable to me over the course of my career. The
So I
other,
mean, I'm glad you kind of connected these two. I was going to ask you the next thing. I mean, in your business of racing, hesitation costs you. You
oh yeah,
hesitate at the last second, right? At at the dealership, I'm assuming hesitation could cost you money as well, right? Especially if an advisor struggle with a customer. Do you feel like sometimes this is like a driver missing the line type of thing?
it can be. I mean, hesitation in racing many times will cost you, but occasionally it will be the difference between bringing the car home in one piece in second, then going for broke on the last lap, and coming home with a crashed race car and finishing last too. So you got to pick and choose, but yeah, you have to be very careful about that in racing. And when you have skilled advisors, I think that you have to trust them just as you would trust a race car driver to make those decisions. But yeah, the training process and getting somebody up to speed to that level where you can trust them is certainly important for the continuity of the operations of the dealer and its profitability. There's no doubt about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, let's talk a little bit more about your experience owning a couple of Midas franchises. I mean, independent repair versus dealership fixed ops type of thing. I think you'd be the right guy to kind of talk about that. It's very rare that I get a fixed up guy. That's what he's trying to do. It's very rare that I get a guy who comes in and says, you know what? I used to own a couple of Midas franchises before, and I used to compete with those dealers. So let's talk a little bit about that, right? So having owned those, I mean, what did the independent repair world understand better than the dealerships don't, in your opinion?
Well, I look at that, and when I look at it now, for after my years of being out of the independent repair shop and franchise auto repair business and being in the dealership, looking back on it, the root cause of what drives people to independence from dealers, I call it the institution. And the institution, as anything scales, the level of the individual that has agency and responsibility is diluted. And so it's very easy for, a technician to say, we didn't build it, we're just here to fix it, and, not provide an in-depth explanation because they're flat rate and they're trying to get their work done. Or, parts department saying, we can't get those tires till next Tuesday. Did they go and explore? Can we get them from Walmart down the street, or buy them from Discount Tires? Or an advisor saying, "I'm sorry, those are the only options I have for you." Did we look into aftermarket options? Did we, look for used parts? Did we give them financing options? Did we offer them a trade-in? All those things. And so, and there's very little accountability or repercussions for those things because they just fall into that diluted individual responsibility, and you can it's very easy to hide behind the OEM and say, oh well, it's Honda, Toyota, Ford, whoever, that they built the car, they designed it, or like where I am, it's wonderful, truly wonderful place to work, and it's a local family business here. It's been in business 54 years, I think now, 53, 54 years. And hey, we've been here. You can hide behind your local reputation, you can hide behind all of those things, and not step out and take responsibility and take that situation by charge. And it's a much less complex, much smaller organization, and that individual level of responsibility and agency is much greater per individual. And I think that simplifies it for the consumer. And that's I think what drives people out of the dealer is the dilution of responsibility is hard for them sometimes if you don't have the right people and the right incentive for the people, they can't break through. Even though in a dealership you've got a customer meets with a service advisor, goes to a service manager, a service director, to the general manager, to the owner. There's like 7 layers of accountability, but it can be just so difficult to break through that. Where you can walk right up to the shop owner and go, "Hey, dude, you messed my car up," and you're looking at that guy. I think that is probably the main thing, is the simplicity of it that appeals to a customer, and the institution is what drives it. And I thought a lot about this over the years, and would say that the institution drives the individual behavior a lot of times through perverse incentive, and it detracts from the ability for the individual to recognize and prioritize. And will a sales manager take a skinny deal? Will we go buy those tires from Sam's Club or Walmart or Discount Tire or whatever and take a skinny deal? And a lot of times when you really drill down into those things, what you'll find is that there might be a manager bonus that a parts manager may have. If he gets to 35% gross retention, gets a bonus. And then can we prioritize and say, well, I'm not going to go buy those tires locally because I won't make any points on them. I'm not going to go get that part that we can get tomorrow from another dealer because I'm going to have to give up 10% of the gross. And what drives that are perverse incentives that are institutionalized, and that drives the behavior. And so I have found that the institution is what drives customers out, and we have to audit the institution against those perverse incentives that are built into it and built by the people that built the institution. So, from the dealer side, you have to take very, very careful consideration when you're building the institution. And, my baseline for this has always been, you have to start with a very thoughtful job description for whatever role that you have. And you have to take a pay plan and match it exactly to that job description so that you're not creating perverse incentives for that person to not take care of your customers. So I'd say that's the biggest thing. And then the other thing, having experience on both sides, is you've got to know your strengths and you've got to play to them. They have the independent guy's got one guy, and that's him, and I often joke and call it vigilante auto repair, because that guy is the judge, the jury, and the executioner, right? If he doesn't like what you got to say, it just throw you out. Where the dealership's got 7 layers of accountability, and you can get some accountability, and there's a lot of resources. If we blow up an engine, we're not going to go out of business because we've got enough money to buy you an engine, right, and do the right thing. So you've got to be able to play to your strengths, and so you really have to zig where they zag. And when I was a Midas dealer, I had all the advantages of doing business with me lined up and queued up and ready to go for that customer, and I do the same when I sit in the chair here. And so I would say that sorry for the lengthy explanation, but it's something that I'm passionate about, and
No, this
got
is
to have
great.
all of those things lined up.
This is great because you really. I had a couple of lined up questions I wanted to ask you, but you kind of answered them. But I want you to remember that word institution. It's funny because last night I recorded a podcast with my data guy, and then when I was done, I'm like, I need to go chill. I watch a Mission Impossible movie. To me, the institution, like I don't know what the name of that Mission Impossible was, but it's a couple of years old.
Right.
It was about the syndicate.
Yes.
The syndicate is this entity that exists of all spooks that kind of created their own thing, but it really was created by MI6.
Yep.
But I have a lot of stories about this institution because I'm kind of new to your business. I
Sure.
approached the business. My opportunity came when I met with an executive at Bridgestone who had started a company called Tire Connect. That's how it started. I'd known George, he's still got a great guy. One day you'll get to meet him. He's at SEMA, he's in NEDA often. But when I talked to him, he was like, Sandy, we want to take our solution, bring it to the car dealership space. And kind of like we were curious about this. So they paid us for 90 days. We spent talking to car dealers. We did research. We talked to over 200 dealership. And that's kind of like a lot of the thing, what I figure out when you say the word institution. I'll tell you more stories about what I found out about the institution. Spooky, but real. But there's data to back up what I found out, to be honest with you. All right. There's some
Sure.
kind of
Yeah.
weird stuff. So let me ask you this: is the dealership losing when you think? I mean, I'm going to shift from that independent shop a little bit, but
Sure.
are they losing because of price or because the customer doesn't understand the value fast enough? Because when I'm thinking about myself, I own two Silverado, two Chevy truck. One is a Suburban, and one is a Silverado High Country. I've always taken my car to the dealership, but I did not a couple of times. But when I went to get those other services done at an independent shop, I ended up doing the whole thing that I would have spent at the dealer. And a lot of that happened. Tell me a little bit, why do you think dealers are losing to these independent shops? Is it pricing? Is it because the customer doesn't understand the value that a dealership can bring? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And so what I would what I how I think about that is there's two different things. Um, I segment the business in two different ways. In that the things that a consumer can easily compare, the price of an oil change, the price of tires, or a battery, you have to be out front. You have to be pricing. They have to be clearly displayed to the customer. It has to be completely transparent, and it has to. If it actually, a lot of times it has to be over the top, so that there's no doubt about the value there, right? Because we, as consumer, understands that you're going to come to a nicer facility, you're going to sit on a nice leather couch, the bathrooms are going to be clean, you're going to have amenities, all those things, so you're going to have generally a better experience aesthetically at a dealer. And when you can stack the aesthetics, the professionalism, with a better price than you can get at a 10-minute oil change place, it becomes a value proposition that is undeniable and easily recognizable by a customer. So I think that part of it right there is something that is invaluable especially to the very public face of the dealership. When you go out and you say, this is what an air filter costs for your car, and what an oil change costs, and we price match and beat Walmart on their prices of tires. So you have to have that aspect of the business. And then when the value comes in is when you really need a qualified technician. So when you've got a car that, the air conditioning's not working or the transmission's malfunctioning, building that trust by doing great value with building that trust, providing great value to your customer when they need those routine services. When it comes time to have a look at those more complex systems, you build that trust with that customer so that price is less of an issue and quality is the main focus of getting that transmission replaced. So I kind of look at them as brothers and sisters or cousins or very close relatives. They're not mutually exclusive to the way that I look at the business. We're going to see a whole bunch of times changing your oil, rotating your tires, putting a set of tires on your car, put some air filters, wiper blades, that kind of stuff. And if you do a good job with that, when that transmission needs to be replaced, you're going to be the only person that they're going to kind of come to. So that is that's kind of my spin on it, and that's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, no. We're gonna come back and look into this a little bit because you brought tires a couple of times, but
Hmm.
I want to talk about profitability problem inside of fixed ops for a little bit. I was reading a report from Cox Automotive, and it
Okay.
says dealer service and parts revenue is at record level,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
dealer share of service visits has dropped 33 to 29%.
Mhm.
When you hear that, what is it telling you?
I'm familiar with the report. Um, yeah, one of those wonky guys that reads white papers.
I'm one of them too, so I'm sorry.
Uh, uh, and just a side note, I started, as a technician, and you have to be very detail oriented. And so when I became a service manager, fixed ops guy, I took that same mindset that I'm going to dive deep and really understand the business. So I do read the white papers when Cox or Reynolds or whoever puts them out. I definitely read them, and so I'm familiar with that. And there were some specifics in that report to address that specific report. Was there were some market conditions that drove that a little bit. And since then, I think we've gained a couple of points back. But to your point, revenue, and here is maybe a side discussion, is that the revenue streams at a dealership are very diverse. We're selling cars, we're financing cars, we've got extended warranties paying bills, we've got customer paying bills, we've got factory warranty paying bills, we selling wholesale parts to body shops, selling parts on the internet, all those kinds of things. We got so many revenue streams, and because of that, and as you maximize each one of those individual areas, you can improve dealership profitability significantly while retention is eroding in your service department. So those things 100% can happen at the same time. Now, as far as addressing retention at the dealer, again, it goes back to providing value to your customer consistently. And I also would say that I'm sure it's going to be part of the discussion later on. But what is retention, and is it actually accurate? That's a big part of making sure that your operations are correct. And I definitely have some thoughts on that as well. So I
No,
don't
totally
know that
agree.
there's been a big, huge shift. You may lose a point or two this year, or gain a point or two back that year. But I don't know that there's been a huge shift in the market, and it's on the dealer to retain that customer. When we lose a customer to the aftermarket, it's generally going to be our fault. And whether it's this specific time that we sold the car, or something that happened 3 cars ago by another dealer, when you get turned off by Baskin Robbins, then you probably don't go back to Baskin Robbins. You probably go to someplace else to get your ice cream, right? So
Yep.
it's on us, and tire stores and Midas mufflers all exist because the dealer didn't do a good job retaining that customer.
Yep, yep. Remember I talked to you about CarMax the other day?
Hmm.
I'll tell you, we can talk a little bit more about that. No, I agree with you. You remember that research I did? We look at, you know, a lot of different metrics around retention, absorption rate, how to
Hmm.
improve some of those metrics. But CAC was one of the things that killed me. Back in the late 90s, 2000 timeframe,
Hmm.
Pizza Hut wrote a white paper. Remember, I told you I also love, I'm a nerd, right? I come from an engineering background. So Pizza Hut talked about lifetime customer value. They are the one who kind of like started that whole idea about it's not about buying one pizza. It's
Sure.
over a lifetime, how many pizzas you're going to buy from me, right?
Right.
One thing that was weird, and we can discuss it when we get into tires later on, the customer acquisition cost for a dealer ranges around 300 plus or minus. This is what it costs you if you consider all the different values we can. But the lifetime value, there's none really that's truly because a lot of those things you're losing is what we found in our research. The dealers are losing to different places, from used car to the CarMax, on tires to the independent shops, right, to the aftermarket. Then when the guys go there, what we also came up in our research was just a 5% bump, right, leveraging tires could add millions to your service revenue type of thing, and we can discuss that. But let me ask you this: what do you see as the biggest hidden profit leaks in fix ops today? Because here's one of the things: I've made a lot of friends in fix ops for a year, and good friend like the Dave Foy of the world, Dwayne Kinsley from LA Car Guy, Ara Princian from Aaron Automotive Group. A lot of good friends who have been kind of like changing my perspective. I'm a business guy, so I've always looked at it from a business perspective. So they brought industry knowledge and kind of like educated me, made me understand what was going on. So where do you think, and you know what I also learned, and just kind of like side note here, the fixed ops guy was always treated like the third class citizen in the company, right? They were never seen. Service was never seen as, it was always about the, like you said, the fancy light, the wonderful couches and all these things.
Yeah.
But truly, when margin has shrunk so much, right, in new cars, where's the money going to come from? Service is pretty much this is where I love what Dave Foy has done in turning fix ops into, the limelight, into on the stage, and say, okay, guys, pay attention to this. This is what's important, and which is, you're doing God's work, my friend. So tell me about hidden profit leaks. Where do you find it in fix up today?
Well, I definitely have an opinion on this.
Share. Even if it's controversial, even the better.
Well, I do want to say you have to start out with a very old adage that still rings true, is that sales cures everything. And that, if there's no sales, there's nothing to worry about. And so, sales cures everything. And so if you have huge sales, the scrutiny is less, I would say. And so, but you can have huge sales, and underneath the hood, it still, might not be healthy, or it certainly could use a tune-up. That's for sure. And in my experience, it's starts with the laws of nature, namely gravity. And gravity can have a very negative effect over time on any business, and certainly in fixed ops. It certainly takes a toll on my aging body, I can tell you that. And when I talk about gravity, excuse my language, but it's specifically the ability of shit to roll downhill. So
it's French. We're okay with it.
Yeah, it's part of my French. And what I mean by that is this. There are the common or golden metrics of the hours per RO, effective labor rate, retention, customer satisfaction. You get 3 or 4 really high level, and you get to your general manager, your executive manager, your owner goes to a 20 group or whatever, goes to some meeting of the minds, and says, hey, our effective labor, everybody's got $1 million an hour, and we're $500,000 an hour. We need better effective labor rate. That's the key. And so that little ball starts rolling downhill, hits the GM, and then the GM all of a sudden has a line in his pay plan that says your service department needs to have this effective labor rate. And then that hits the service manager, and the service manager says, okay. And then the next thing you know, that lands as a line on the pay plan of your service advisor. And when you start giving your service advisor compensation based on the shop CLR or hours per RO or things, or retention or any of those kinds of things, what you're going to find is that there gets to be a whole bunch of smoke in those numbers. And you cannot effectively manage your business by the numbers if your numbers aren't accurate. So where I always start with this is I audit the pay plans and the incentives across the structure and say, if we're looking at effective labor rate and all of a sudden a service advisor is paid on effective labor rate, they're creating hundreds of ROs a month, thousands and thousands of ROs over any month, and tens of thousands of repair orders over the course of a year. And slight little ticks will make that effective labor rate go up, and they're going to maximize their pay plan. And I promise you, they're crafty and they can figure it out. And it can be as subtle as, shaving a tenth off of a job for a technician, which will boost it, or not taking a job or not selling a job because it doesn't have the effective labor rate that they need to hold their bonus. So, at a certain point, everybody hits their bonus because we've got a great effective labor rate, but we're shooting customers out the door and skimming text hours and doing all that stuff. And all those great sales or that great effective labor rate is not healthy for the business. So the first thing that I say is you got to take the smoke out of the numbers. And the second reason is that those KPIs do exist and they are helpful in managing your business. But they're never to be incentives. They're tools to measure the business, and then that's on a good, effective management team, a good service manager, parts manager, general manager, to take and say, if we're low on effective labor rate, what actually is driving that? We've got to do the work and drill down and find out why our hours per RO are low. And what often happens in institutions is that little ball rolls downhill, and at the bottom of it is a big old splat of stuff nobody wants to step in. And so that to me is where profit, retention, all of those things leak. Retention, CSC. I've seen advisors create 2 repair orders on a vehicle by the direction of the service manager to boost RO count, and also you get 2 visits from that customer, and hey, you've got a retained customer. I've seen customer service, we give your huge incentives for your customer satisfaction ratings, and all of a sudden you had 82% of your emails were valid in the system, and now only 65% of your emails are valid in the system because those emails start getting changed because we don't want that customer to get a survey. So you're not, you're just avoiding the negative feedback instead of, actually getting the negative feedback and managing your business properly. So there's all kinds of ways to game the system. So when you use KPIs as a pay line versus a tool to analyze and fix your business, you're going to leak profitability by not doing the hard work to fix the business.
No, I think this is, I love, you made so many interesting points. I mean, I think this is, I always like, this is what I would say. You say, I think you said in my words, right? I'm paraphrasing it. Busy service doesn't mean healthy service. It's pretty much what you were saying. The revenue changes behavior, kind of like what you were talking about. And you talk a lot about metrics, though. Here's the part that I wanted to ask you about.
Sure.
Is there, we talk RO, EL, all those different things. That is important. Is there like one metrics that you guys all, not necessarily the fix-up leader, but the leadership at the dealership that they obsess about, but really doesn't mean that much? You know what I mean? But they always kind of like, oh, this is the golden metrics that we need to focus on. But from a fix-up perspective, you're like, it's not the way it works. Anything like that you can share with us?
There's 2 things that come to mind. When you're sitting at the highest of high levels, it's gross per employee, right? Or sales per employee. So we made $1 million and we got 1,000 employees. We made $100 or $1,000 per, we made $1,000 per employee. And the metric is we need to make $2,000 per employee. So we just need to cut our staff in half, or we have too much staff. So there's that metric, and it's very helpful to understand. But when you're on the front lines and you go, no, actually, we really do need 2 porters, or we actually do need 3 car washers or something, like it's impossible to cover the hours and the volume. So sometimes the practical reality in that metric is lost. So I would say that that's the first thing. And one of the most important metrics that we look at quite often is absorption rate or fixed ops coverage. And there's so much that goes into that. And without fully understanding and being and setting the expectations for what absorption coverage is for your organization, not comparing it to others, is so important to effectively managing it. And I definitely can drill down on that for you a little bit.
No, absolutely. You know what's funny? You mentioned absorption. In my
Mhm,
research, this is
mhm.
what I found out.
Okay,
Whoever was being honest to tell me the truth, they did, because we were talking off camera, right?
sure.
It's not something people would say, but I would say a good majority was still at 60%.
Okay.
There was a good bunch in the 80% range.
Hmm.
But then I have a few guys like the Dwayne Kinsley of the world at LA
Hmm.
Car Guy. They have certain outfit where they are over 100% to
Sure.
110%. You know what I mean? And these guys, like you, Richard, they see the business very, very differently. I told you this, right? I call it skill stacking, because these gentlemen, they come from, like, you come from racing, you come from Midas, you have all this experience, and then when you take over the role of what you're doing right now, you bring a different skill set to look outside of the box. And that's what I see with guys like you and the Dwayne of the world. They just see this thing differently. They're not just like following a set of script that was given to them in, I don't know if you go to Nada Academy to learn about fix up, or it's just the school of hard knocks, right? And you made lists and stuff like that. But that's kind of like what I see is the difference happening out there. I mean, absorption rate ranges from 60 to over 100, but a good part of these people, they are now waking up and say, oh, we need to do something better. We need to improve. And these are some of the conversations I'm having to learn from guys like you who have experience doing it, to see what we can do to help the community, to be honest with you.
Well, and I agree with you 100%. Bringing we're very institutionalized, and
Mhm.
so
That word
uh,
comes back
it
again.
does. And so, the technician becomes an advisor, becomes an assistant service manager, and and then a service man. And so that person has been inside the 4 walls of a dealership their entire life, and or their working life, I guess is what I would say. And so, having not experienced things outside of the dealer is something that is a benefit in a large way, but certainly can be limiting uh, as well. And
Yeah.
I,
No,
I, I,
experience is important. Don't get me wrong.
oh
You
yeah,
need to
yeah,
know your
yeah, yeah,
business.
yeah.
But if you're gonna start, like, the definition of insanity, right?
I
That's
do.
that's pretty much the way
Repeat,
I
right?
look at it. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so it's funny, just an anecdotal thing. One of the things that I've done over the years, several times, if you get a group of inexperienced advisors, for example, and you get a group of 20 somethings that are, trying to figure out how to be a good service advisor, you ask them, have any of you ever been to Ruth's Chris, or, yeah, certainly not some really out of the way, high end steakhouse, but something, Ruth's Chris or there above, something that, and take it's a little talking to the dealer, but you say, hey, let me take them to a great steakhouse or a great hotel and let them experience what great service is. And you would be surprised how, when you take a 2 or 3 20-something service advisors to a dinner at Ruth's Chris, and the different perspective they come back to the service drive with, because they may have been to a nice restaurant for a wedding reception or something, but when you take them there as a training exercise, man, it changes a lot. So
Light bulbs.
yeah, light bulbs go off. This is the kind of level of service that we want to, we aspire to.
Yeah.
But I do
And I
want
think
to.
as a consumer, this is what we expect from our dealership, to be honest.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we're going to charge Ruth's Chris prices for steaks, so we better deliver, Ruth's Chris,
Service.
level service. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
I
I mean, in a
I'm
Honda.
one of those guys. I'm okay to pay a little bit more to come to a dealership. This is just me, because I get the peace of mind that my car is being worked on a technician that has been trained by the factory, right? That's kind of like the first thing that comes in mind. It's a dealership. Like you said, if an engine blows up or anything happen as a result of their fault, they'll make it right to me. Because again, it's about lifetime value, right? That place that I bought my truck, I bought 3-4 cars from them. So they're going to have to continue remembering their good service, because the one day they cross me, there's plenty of competition in the neighborhood that I can just go to, right? But I think I agree with you. Hey, I want to shift this to something that's very dear to my heart, because this is what gave me my entrance into your business, into automotive in general, which is Tire Connect, the Bridgestone business that I was telling you. Let's talk about tire economics, if that's okay with you.
That's an easy discussion for me.
Very good, very good. So let me ask you this. This is what my research shows me, and then you tell me whether I'm off or not. Here's what I figure out. There's a lot of problem with tires when dealership was concerned, but there were 3 major problems, and I'll tell you what I think they are, and then tell me whether you think I'm spot on or I'm just off on this. The way the tire system is set up. I mean, you have OEM tire program. It's very important. You are contractually obligated to use them, because there's all sort of little $25 incentive here, that little incentive there, or you get better inventory there. But Rich, I'm sorry, I come from the outside world. In my world, we don't do things this way. This looks like a racket to me. It's like you are forced to buy within a certain community. Now, I'm like, this is great. When I started researching it, I'm like, oh, so there's this company, they come in. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a BMW dealer where I had my Mercedes dealer. I was talking to the fixed up guy there. He's like, you know what? As a matter of fact, one of these companies, they have one of their own guy sitting in the service lane. As the customer comes in, they have this little machine. They're measuring, depth of tire and stuff like that to force them. I'm like, man, this is horrible, because I don't understand how you guys can do this. But anyway, here's what I found out. These programs, they are important. Because you have contracts, but they created a couple of problems. And that's where I think that solution I was telling you when we were researching, we figured out visibility was the first problem. I'll give you an example. Just pull up your laptop and say tire shop near me in your neighborhood. Most likely, Joe's tire shop will come up before any of the car dealers come up. And every car dealers, most likely, for tires, right? I'm not talking service here. I'm saying tires, for example. Why is that? Because the tire program, based on the OEM program, the way I'm looking at it, they have been built with a technology called iframe. iframe doesn't allow Google to index and crawl your website. So many dealers are suffering that. I call it a visibility problem. The question is, it's like the forest and the trees and the tree falling. I say, if the conversation is happening online and you're not part of it, did it happen? I guess maybe we'll know, right? Because the dealer is not part of the conversation. That's the first thing. The other thing that I found out was what I call a structural economic problem. What I found out was the dealer's price are higher, not because the dealer is necessarily charging more. It's because they're limited to a small subset of suppliers. Hey, this is America. We need competition to drive price up or down. Yes or no? So this is the other problem that I found out that was happening into that space. So when I think about tires, I want to get your perspective. Would you agree that this is one of the most misunderstood profit and retention categories in the dealership? Or you think I'm wasting my time on this?
Well, I think that you are correct that there's a lot to be gained in the tire business. Whether or not you're wasting your time, it is a big institution for
Oh, yeah,
to
I'm
try to
familiar with
drive
this.
change.
Hmm.
So um, tires are the most important singular item for a dealership service department.
Why is that? Tell me more. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's very plain for us here to understand. Apple Tree is not the largest by any measure Honda dealer. I mean, we're a upper mid level to lower high volume store, so we're not a very small store, but certainly there are larger dealers, within a few hundred miles of us. If you go 500 miles from here, you're going to find some stores that are significantly larger. Anyway, but we're in the top 10% of the nation in tire sales,
Oh, very good.
and it's wildly important to us. And the service advisor pay plan includes incentives to sell tires. Our parts department, begrudgingly, at first had to get on the tire program and know that we're just going to sell tires and we're going to do it cheap. The reason for that is very simple. Your OEM tires are going to they're going to need to be replaced somewhere between 30 and 40,000 miles for that first set of tires.
Hmm.
And guess when your warranty runs out? 36,000 miles, right? So just about the time that your warranty's running out, your tires are worn out. So if you can put those tires on the car, then the car is going to come back here for their oil changes because they're going to get their tires rotated, and we do the tire rotations at no charge if you purchase them here. So, and when it comes back for the tire rotations and the oil changes, we're going to take a look at the brakes and the filters and the wiper blades and all of those things. So if you can hang a set of tires on a car at 35 or 35, 40,000 miles, you are likely, if you do a good job, you're going to retain that customer for another 3 or 4 years until that set of tires wears out. And so the advantage that the dealer has over the tire store, and this is kind of one of those places where we zig when they zag, is we can absolutely, and we do, price match and beat all of our competitors. If you look at our advertising, we name names. We put Walmart, Sam's Club, Discount, Pep Boys, we put them right in our advertisement and say we beat all of their prices. And when we get questioned by a consumer who may not be familiar, like, how can you beat Sam's Club? So that's simple. It's specifically when you're talking about somebody like Discount Tire, we go, well, that's easy. We zig when we zag and say, we've got 137 different ways that we make money at a dealership. We sell cars, finance cars, we sell parts. They only sell tires. They've got to make money selling tires. We don't. It's
Yeah.
more important for us to retain you as a customer, and we don't want you going to Discount Tire. So I'm gonna back up $100. It's gonna cost me $100 to put a set of tires on your car, and I'm gonna do it $300 cheaper than Discount Tire. And that just drives loyalty. It drives value. It drives retention. So we sell tires.
So let me ask you this then.
Sure.
This is fair. I appreciate, the creativity here. Why do you think it's like you're giving a discount because you will catch it up on other services? I get it. But let's go back to this is the part I found out, right?
Mhm.
Why is it you think the Costco's it's not just about volume. This is what I'm trying to say. And I think that's where dealership should think about. It's not just because Costco sell more volume in tires, that's why they have cheaper price. I don't think that's the truth, to be honest with you. Because even in the tire industry, it's pretty well regulated. The middlemen are well known. The margin is small, right? That's kind of like thing. But for you dealership, I mean, this is important because it's what comes as a result of when someone buy time. You're gonna change. You're gonna rotate it, brake work, cabin filter, you name it. The whole shebang is gonna get done.
Right.
But the question I have is, you say you're willing to lose money because you'll gain it somewhere else. Why
Yeah.
is it you think you cannot be as competitive as them? Independent shop, they are connected to some of the top suppliers and the lower tier suppliers as well. What does that do? There's promotion happening in the industry all the time. So when a customer comes and they say you do price match, they are able to price a tire and look across multiple suppliers, not by calling them. Like my advisor, no. I'm talking system today that are designed for that. And we'll talk about that at some point. I don't think you guys should continue losing money to match, especially. I saw Mr. Nagala from McGovern Auto do like a podcast on car dealers guy or something like that. He was talking about the same thing. Everybody understands now that this tire thing is very important, but I don't think the dealers needs to suffer. I
Well,
think there's a way you can enhance your existing OEM program. And that's the conversation that I think that should be had, to be honest with
well, what I'm going to say is that almost very, in very rare instances, do we ever actually lose money putting tires on cars.
you. Yeah.
Now, we here, and we're very vested in putting tires on people's cars. We do, again, we had to retrain the institution not just to look for that main supplier. And so our guys have logins for 4 or 5 of the top suppliers that all deliver, once, twice a day. And, we actually have a warehouse right down, we have 2 warehouses from 2 different suppliers right down the streets. And, we get will calls from them. We do all of those things. Now, the overwhelming majority of the tires we buy through the program because they're in inventory. But if we need something that's either out of our inventory, out of our offerings that come through the OEM program, or we need to serve a customer and find that set of tires today, we're going to do those things. So we don't hesitate to do that. And I am in total agreement with you. And that's where, the institutionality of it all comes, is that there are dealers that'll just go, I can't, we only order tires when we get a tire order of 100 tires so that we can get a discount on that. So we only order tires like, once every 10 days or so, because it takes that long for us to get an order of 100 tires together to get that discount and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
You know
all of
what's
those.
funny?
Go
I
ahead.
love the way you present this, though. Because to me, when I hear you talk, that's like the Midas franchisee guy talking. Because he had to be creative. He had to find ways. This is what I talk about. Those skill brings into what you're doing. No, I appreciate that, Rich. I think this is what makes your success, to be honest with you. That's great. I think anybody out there listening who are thinking like McGovern, which is one of the largest, right? When you think about Auto Group, they are saying, oh, tires are important. Everybody all of a sudden has woken up now and says, oh, I'm not gonna don't go down the street. I want your tire business. So this is kind of like what I like to hear, to be honest with you. So
Yeah.
that resonates with what I'm saying. So let me ask you this one then. When customer buy tires somewhere else, you were saying a lot about those downstream revenue that is at risk, correct? Elaborate a little bit more on that. I want to see how you see it from your perspective.
Well, we are completely, we empower our advisors that if we have a customer that, for instance, comes in for an oil change and then we, do you want your tires rotated? Oh, no, they do that. I'm going to leave from here and go down to Discount Tire because I get free tire rotation. It's not even like, it's like, oh, no, we'll just take care of that for you today. You don't need to go back there. We'll just rotate them for you while we've got it in, no charge, And so, that mentality, oh, we found a nail. Oh, well, don't put the nail, don't replace the nail, fix the nail. I get that free at Costco. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it for you while it's here.
Smart.
No need to go back there. So our car's already here. It's on a lift. You're already spending some money here. I'll take care of them, patch the tire for you. No problem at all.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at the metrics. Remember, you and I, we are nerds about those metrics, right? 78%, according to the industry research, it says where people maintain, where they buy tires, that's where they're going to maintain their car. So something for a
100%.
dealership to think about, right? If
Yeah.
you're going to let the customer go, you're going to lose all those services going with it. Look, this was interesting. I think from what I gathered from you, it's not just about the tire sales.
No,
It's about what comes with it, right? The whole package, the whole kit and
it's
caboodle, like my old friend Dwayne will call it.
there are very few pursuits that are largely not about making money within the confines of any business. But making money at tires is about 17th down on the list for us as far as priorities when it comes to actually connecting with a customer and putting tires on their car from our institution. And again, rarely do we ever have to actually physically lose money to put tires on a car, but we're very, very willing to do so. And it's long ago became much, much less about making a profitable sale on tires, retaining
Yeah.
customers.
So this is critical for improving absorption rate. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely have some real thoughts about absorption rate, and but yes, over time, retaining customers is healthy for anyone's bottom line, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah. No, this is interesting. But so let me ask you this:
sure.
you are a Midas franchisee. You guys got a lot of business that the dealers did not want to do, right?
That's the only reason.
I think that's what CarMax was built. Remember, we talked about Dave Foy and I were talking about that at NADA. We're like, dealership didn't want to deal with it, right? So,
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you guys seem to be doing it really well with your leadership at Apple Tree? But what do you see in the industry happening among your peers and colleagues? How are they trying to capture this business back? What are they doing?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is you have to be good at the basics, the blocking and the tackling. You have to take good care of your customers. You have to do a good job, and that in and itself is your biggest retention tool. But unfortunately, sometimes dealers can get a little bit gimmicky about it, and it's not healthy, But and generally, it's not successful over time. But I've seen things over the years. One time, I was at a dealer that this many years ago. They treated your windshield with like some super duper Rain-X, right? So you
Hmm.
didn't have to, and you could get it reapplied once every 6 months if you came in, and it was no charge. We put it on when we sold it to you in the car, and then every 6 months you came back to get your, you know, super Rain-X reapplied to your windshield. And if you didn't come back in time, then we weren't gonna, we would charge you to reapply it and all those kinds of things. But just to drive retention, to get that person to come back in for any reason, we did gimmicky things like that, and just some of the stuff, the gimmicky stuff. It's artificial, and the results are largely you can get a spike for a short time, but largely ineffective over time, and actually generates negative customer interactions because you haven't been back in 6 months, it's been 8 months, so now we're going to have to charge you $50 to put the stuff back on your windshield, or if we used to hand out these intrusively large contracts that said that if you did every bit of maintenance that was in this huge book every time came here, that you get free tires for life.
Okay.
And so with the sale of the car, they would get this extensive maintenance schedule and all that stuff. And so the customer had to come back in all of the time, like every 3 weeks we had to see it. I mean, probably a little bit less than that, but, and then you could always find that one time when we didn't put one wiper blade on that car. So yep, you're out of the free tire, Well, but I filled out 99 of those 100 checks over the last 2 years, but you're not going to give me free tires because I missed a set of wiper blades, just all those kinds of things like that. So there's a lot of things. A lot of companies will come in and say, hey, we've got the greatest way to drive a bunch of customers in, but largely unsuccessful. You do have to be good at the basics of the core of your business. You got to take care of your customers, and you got to do a good job. And that's the key to long-term success and relevancy.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Let's switch subject. You ready for the next thing? I found out that in reality, the dealers don't own their own data in many ways. I mean, I'm like, because one of my friends said, oh, yeah, I can get a dump CSV file to put into Excel that I can look into it and things like that. I'm like, how's that? Then I went further and researched further, and I saw some Reuters article about our good friend at CDK, where they were in an antitrust lawsuit. They paid, big
No,
numbers.
I'm
In terms
familiar
of,
with it. Yep.
you're very familiar with it, right? So as a result, just for me being a thought leader into the space, I wrote an article. I named it the Dealer Data Fabric. And the concept of the article was simple. You don't own your data, you don't own your business. You're just renting it from somebody else. And what I encourage dealer, I'm not selling anything, right? I don't do this anymore. I'm saying, okay, my friends in the dealership business, I come from banking. I come from manufacturing. I come from healthcare. Those guys, they own their data. Regulation forces them to own their data. As a matter of fact, when HIPAA is concerned, if you don't own your data, you have all kind of issues of fine. And what I thought about was, I think dealers are putting themselves at a disservice. Then comes AI. AI it's like garbage in, garbage out. Everybody's talking about AI in the dealership business. That's kind of like prompted me. And I'm like, if you don't have your own data, that data is not governed properly, what do you think AI is going to give you? Garbage in, garbage out type of thing, right? So I know you're very well versed on this subject. As a matter of fact, I know you have some initiative going on. We'd mentioned, and yes, I have that guy, by the way, that architect that's gonna give you a call. I'll make an introduction via email for you. Talk to him, right? He's a great gentleman, and see what you can learn and get from him. Maybe he might be able to help you, or maybe guide you. And he's a good friend to have anyway. So let's talk about data.
Okay.
The most important operational data is still living in systems, and the dealer does not have full control. Do you see that as a problem?
Well, I don't really see that we're not in control of our data.
How? It's sitting to CDK. You say, I want to run analytics on it. CDK says, I'll give you a report of it, an output for it. You don't have access to the data. I will give you something.
I think that if any piece of data that I want,
Yes,
I can get out of my DMS.
correct. You got to go download it in the CSV, correct?
So the data is housed within the DMS. I can get anything out of it that I want. Now, with the antitrust suit that you're talking about, some of those, and specifically addressing what you're talking about, because that chain of dealers are switching from one DMS provider to another, and they were forcing the data transfer because they actually do own the data. When one DMS was saying, well, you can't have the data until midnight on the 31st, and then we'll throw it all at the other guy. And the dealer group won that lawsuit and said, no, you two have to have a peaceful transfer over time. So I think that kind of establishes who actually does own the data. But when you come into any of these large companies that, global manufacturers like Honda, Toyota, Ford, whatever, Chevy, and even outside our, industry, any big company realizes the value of data. And way before we came across, free apps on the internet, and if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, right? And so, yeah, if you're not paying for that app, you are the product. And that concept is very plain to see and very transparent at this point for consumers, for the most part. But they realized early on that the value of that data, and so it's baked into the franchise agreements, and the OEMs are the ones that bless the DMS providers, and if you can't become a DMS provider without the blessing of an OEM. So I'd say that it's definitely, there's a lot of chefs in that kitchen, and it definitely is. It can be a little murky. But as far as the data goes, we you can have AI access that data, and we take our data, download it to, or off source it to a lockbox, and then two parties can access it. We can push data in, they can access the data, all that kind of stuff, and keep that data set, fresh. So,
I don't disagree with you. And this is the whole concept of what I'm trying to say is
sure.
because you have those limitations,
Mm-hmm.
you should build your own fabric. That means is so the reason I came up with that, I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say tomorrow you decide to buy a third-party software that you think is very important to your date, to your business, right? For your dealership. And you say, I'm gonna integrate it with my DMS. You know what the DMS charges that company who wants to have one little API call?
Yep.
Over $100,000. And that's one problem. You were talking about AI. You said it right. You are not querying this system directly. You
Right.
need to extract that data, you need to normalize it and do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's where I agree. I understand the limitation. What I'm saying is I think what you guys should be thinking in that space is to pull a playbook from those guys who have those data. Start normalizing that data today. Start extracting it. Make it regular. Make it because here's the thing. We were talking about inventory, for example, that sit into the DMS. If you what is a batch file gonna update? What, every 5 minutes? What are you gonna make it every second? You can't. That computer that's pulling that data is gonna crash, right? We're gonna run out of memory. So you are doing it every hour or every 24 hours, whatever the thing is. You're always behind the eight ball. Your data is not in near real time. Well, maybe you don't need real time data. But the point I'm trying to make is I think if you own your data, you have all sort of superpowers as a dealership. But not everyone is going to be able to do that. Maybe if some company's entrepreneur listening to me out there, they'll say, all right, let me find a solution about how dealership can extract all the information, have it in a centralized place. I'm just surprised that these type of things don't exist anymore. All I hear is the complaint of vendors in your industry. Do you see that?
I do. And so we actually, several years back, made an institutional decision. And what we have done, and I've been highly engaged with it, is our DMS provider. We have constantly pushed them, and I have been highly involved in development of these types of tools with our native DMS provider. So rather than, trying to tack my 99 grievances on the front door of the institution, I decided to, jump in and
You went into the matrix.
I jumped into the matrix and, decided that if we were going to take the money that we spend with the DMS provider, we were going to fully utilize the utilities that were available with that DMS provider. It's been very effective for us. And so what we don't have is 27 different third-party vendors trying to dance around the connections and processing the data. And then every time our DMS provider has an update, then their stuff crashes. And it's, and for an instance, for a company the size of Appletree, again, it's a really nice business, but we don't have, a full-time IT staff that's got guys with calling the DMS and calling the third-party guy and, doing all that stuff and curing all of those things. So we made a decision as a company to just really try to fully maximize the the capabilities of our native DMS.
No,
And
no, that makes sense. I mean, I
yeah,
agree with you. As a small company, you don't have the ability to have your own IT shop and developers, etc. It would be best if you could work with your DMS solution and they allow and give you those services. But I
mhm,
don't think that's particularly because I think everybody is like protecting their own hide. type of thing in
Yeah.
this whole thing. And then at the end, guys like you said, the small dealership, you suffer.
We have to make the practical decisions every day, whether to work within the institution or try to fight against it, and to be
Yeah, I
strategic in
get it.
those decisions. And in this one particular thing, I think that for our business and our purposes, pushing our DMS and being part of the beta testing of apps that are in development and being a part of their product development teams and being on their calls and you know going to their innovation center, visiting their innovation centers, and meeting with the executives and having an open line really has created some great opportunities for us. And the other thing I will say, there's two other things I will say
Uh-huh.
about our decision to do that. The one is that because sometimes, most of the time, we don't make the decision to maximize the native DMS, we end up with a bunch of third parties. And we're actually most of the time paying for a service that that already exists in the DMS, but is difficult to execute. And if you take the time to do that, then what you're ending up with is a less overall cost. So, and then, and so, for instance, one of the things I always talk about is our DMS provider has a great texting platform for texting our service advisors to our customers, but it's terribly difficult to get right and set up. So but we spent and did the time and did the hard work to set that texting platform up. Most dealers don't spend the time and effort to do that, and they just get a third party provider to provide them a texting platform. And so you end up paying double. So it runs your expenses up for that. And the other thing that it does, and this is one of the real key things for us, is that our service advisors are busy people, right? And literally probably 90% of what they do occurred inside our DMS. And so they don't have to have 5 different screens open up to go over here, go out of the DMS, open this window, go to the texting platform, text in that platform, get out of there, go to a different one to grab a payment from a customer, get over here to send a video MPI to the customer. All of that because we've chosen to go with our DMS and really push our DMS to get those systems in line and then do the hard work of setting them up. Our service advisors rarely leave the DMS screen. And I think that that's probably one of the issues as you start stacking multiple vendors is it makes it much more complex for it makes the task so much more for the service advisors. So, and when you can clean that up where they don't have to switch between 13 different screens to get those tasks done, it really improves efficiency. So,
Then what? Let me ask you this: then is
sure.
this a technology problem or is it a control problem?